They say witches aren't real, that they're just legends, old stories meant to scare children and keep them from wandering too far into the woods. But what if I told you that witches do exist? Not the kind with pointy hats and broomsticks, but real people, twisted, disturbed individuals who hide in the shadows, practicing rituals that no sane person should witness. Sometimes they don't hide at all. Sometimes they walk among us. And sometimes they let us see them. Tonight, we dive into 5 terrifying encounters with witches. Not the fictional kind, but real flesh and blood people whose presence alone was enough to leave lasting scars. Some of these stories involve eerie, almost supernatural elements, but others are purely human. And that's what makes them even more terrifying. Sit back, turn off the lights, and let's begin. It happened when I was 17. My friend Daniel and I had a habit of riding our bikes just outside town, past an old abandoned farm. There was something eerie about that place. Overgrown fields, a house that had been empty for years, and a lone, sagging barn that looked like it would collapse at any moment. One summer evening, just before sunset, we were riding past when we saw her. A woman, standing in the middle of the field, barefoot, wearing a long, tattered dress. Her hair was wild, tangled, and covered most of her face. She wasn't moving, just standing there, facing away from us, her arms slightly outstretched like she was waiting for something. Daniel, always the braver one, shouted, "Hey, you okay?" No reaction. He whistled, then waved. Nothing. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach twist. The grass around her feet was moving, shifting, but there was no wind. It was as if something was writhing beneath the surface. "Dude, let's go," I muttered, but Daniel wasn't listening. He was already off his bike, stepping closer. Then she turned. Her eyes were black. Not like dark-colored irises, but entirely black, like 2 pits in her skull. And her mouth, she was smiling. Too wide, too unnatural. Then, without a word, she took off running toward us. Not stumbling, not jogging, sprinting. We bolted. Daniel tripped over his bike trying to get on, and I swear to God, I thought she was going to reach him. But just as she was about to grab him, she stopped. She stood there, just a few feet away, head tilted, watching us. Then she whispered something. I didn't catch it, but Daniel did, his face drained of all color, and without another word, he pedaled away so fast I could barely keep up. We never rode past that farm again. And Daniel, he refused to ever talk about what she said. But I know one thing. A week later, I woke up to find deep, black scratches all over my bedroom window, like someone had dragged their nails across the glass. Over and over again, that woman, she knew where I lived. I grew up in a small town near San Miguel de Allende in central Mexico. My grandfather used to tell me stories about witches, brujas, as we call them. He'd say they weren't like the ones in movies. They didn't fly on broomsticks or cast spells with wands. They were old women who lived in the hills, who could curse people with just a glance. And if you ever heard one calling your name at night, you were never, ever supposed to answer. I never believed in any of it. Not until I met her. It was late one summer night. I was 22 and had just gotten home from a party in town. I was a little drunk, but not too bad. Just buzzed enough that my senses were dull. The streets were empty as I walked back to my house at the edge of town. That's when I saw her, an old woman, sitting on the curb, staring at me. She was dressed in layers of tattered, filthy clothes, her gray hair matted with dirt. At first, I thought she was just a homeless woman, but something about her felt Off. Her eyes were dark and sunken, her lips dry and cracked, and she was smiling. Buenas noches, muchacho. Her voice was raspy, almost a whisper. I nodded politely but didn't stop walking. Then she said my name, my full name. Ven, hijo, acercate. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to ignore her, to keep walking, but I was frozen. She shouldn't have known my name. I had never seen her before. No seas grosero. She clicked her tongue. Siempre te vio caminando solo. Siempre tan solido. My throat went dry. I forced my legs to move. I didn't look back. By the time I got home, my skin was crawling. I locked my doors, closed the curtains, and lay in bed, telling myself she was just a crazy old woman. Then, at around 3 a.m., someone started knocking on my window. Not hard, just a soft, rhythmic tapping. Tock, tock, tock. My blood turned to ice. My room was on the second floor. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then, I heard her voice. A bream, muchacho. It was a whisper, barely audible. I squeezed my eyes shut. I didn't answer. The knocking continued for what felt like an eternity, until finally, it stopped. The next morning, I found something outside my window. A dead chicken, its throat slit. I left town that same week. But sometimes, when I'm alone in a quiet place, I swear, I can still hear that soft, rhythmic tapping. Tock, 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 and a voice whispering my name. I never thought I'd see someone die in front of me. It was supposed to be a fun trip, a week in Haiti, exploring the culture, the mountains, the beaches. I was with 3 friends, all of us in our late 20s, looking for an adventure. But adventure isn't always what you expect. It was our 5th day there when we decided to visit a rural village near the mountains. Our guide, Jacques, was a local, a man in his 50s with a quiet but friendly demeanor. He told us about Haitian folklore, about voodoo, and about the mambo, the priestesses who were said to have a connection to the spirits. But he also warned us. There are some mambo who do not serve the spirits of light. His voice was low. If you hear someone whispering your name at night, you do not answer. And if you see an old woman walking alone in the hills, you never follow her. We laughed it off. It was just another folk tale, right? That night, we set up camp near the village. The air was thick and humid, the jungle alive with the sounds of insects and distant drums. Jacques had gone into town for supplies, so it was just the 4 of us. Then, around midnight, we heard the footsteps, slow, shuffling just outside our tents. At first, we thought it was Jacques coming back, but when we peeked outside, there she was, a woman, thin, ancient, wrapped in dirty rags. Her skin looked like dry leather, stretched tight over her bones. She was barefoot, her long, yellow nails scraping against the dirt as she walked, and she was looking right at us. Ovri Patla, her voice was hoarse. When Bez when you, open the door. I need you. We froze. None of us spoke. Then she smiled, a toothless, gaping grin. That's when my friend Ryan made the worst mistake of his life. Hey, lady, you okay? He called out. Her eyes snapped to him. Something in the air changed. It felt heavier, like the oxygen had been sucked away. The sound of the jungle stopped. No crickets, no frogs, just silence. Ryan took a step forward. She tilted her head, her smile widening. Pas Lee, someone yelled. Jacques. He was sprinting toward us from the village, his machete in hand. Ryan turned to look at him, just for a second, and when he turned back, the old woman was inches from his face. None of us saw her move. She had just appeared there. Ryan let out a strangled gasp, his body convulsing violently. He dropped to his knees, clutching his chest. His eyes rolled back. His mouth foamed. Jacques shoved the woman aside, muttering in Creole, waving his machete in front of him. The woman hissed a guttural, unnatural sound before vanishing into the trees. Ryan was dead before he hit the ground. We tried, CPR. We tried everything, but his body was cold, like he had been dead for hours, not seconds. Jacques made us leave immediately. He didn't let us pack, didn't let us argue. Just go. Before we left, I looked back. The woman was there, standing in the trees, watching us. Her smile was gone, but her eyes were still locked onto Ryan's body, like she was waiting. I'm Musa Jallo, and for a long time, I believed that curses were just stories, warnings passed down by the elders to keep us in line. I was wrong. In 2016, I worked as a taxi driver in Banjul, the capital of the Gambia. It was a simple job, enough to keep food on my table. I had a wife, Awa, and a daughter. For two, my world. Life was hard, but we managed until I made a terrible mistake. It was late October, just after the rainy season, when she got into my taxi. An old woman, wrapped in a red and black babou, the traditional robe of our people. She had scarred skin, milky eyes, and a strange bracelet of bones around her wrist. She smelled horrible, a mix of sweat, rot, and something I couldn't describe. "Take me to Abioko," she muttered, naming a small village outside the city. I hesitated. It was far, and it was already late. But she offered triple the fare. So I agreed. I should have never done that. The ride was silent. I tried making conversation, but she just stared ahead, whispering under her breath. I could hear the words, but didn't understand them. Some ancient language, not Mandinka, not Wolof, not even French. Then she started laughing. Low at first, then louder. A dry, cackling sound that made my skin crawl. "Driver," she finally said, "do you know who I am?" I swallowed hard. "No, ma'am." She grinned, revealing blackened, rotting teeth. "I am Mami Wada's daughter, and I see your future." Mami Wada, the water spirit feared across West Africa. Some worship her. Others fear her. "You are a wicked man, Musa Jallo," she whispered, "and wicked men must be punished." I slammed the brakes. "Get out of my car." She just smiled, her eyes full of something not human. "I curse you, Musa. You will lose everything." Then she left the car. I felt upset, but I didn't believe in curses, so I continued my day. The next morning, Awa fell sick. A strange illness. Her skin turned gray, her body weak. We took her to every doctor in Banjul. No one could explain it. 2 days later, Fatu drowned. She was only 5 years old. She had been playing by the well in our yard when she fell in. We found her face down in the water. I started drinking. I stopped working. My mind was shattered. Then, on the 7th day, the nightmares began. Every night, I saw her, the old woman, standing at the foot of my bed, whispering my name. "Musa." I felt her hands on my throat, her fingers pressing, choking. By the end of the month, I was homeless. Awa had left me, blaming me for everything. I tried to find the woman, to beg for forgiveness. I searched every village, every market. No one knew her, but they all said the same thing. You should not have angered a Sangoma. A Sangoma, a witch, a healer, a priestess. They can cure, they can curse. It's been 8 years now. I still see her in my dreams. I still wake up gasping for air, feeling her hand around my throat. I have nothing left, and I know she's not finished with me yet. My name is Daniel Carter, and I have seen something no human should ever witness. In November 2019, I traveled to Thailand with my best friend, Ethan. We were both photographers, always looking for hidden places, ancient cultures, strange traditions. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. One night, In a bar in Chiang Mai, we met an old Thai man named Sakta. His face was wrinkled and burned, like he had been in a fire long ago. He told us about a secret festival held once every few years in the deep jungles of northern Thailand, where the borders of Laos and Myanmar meet. It is called the Kratha, he whispered, his voice trembling. The Feast of the Witches. At first, we laughed, but then he grabbed Ethan's wrist so hard his knuckles turned white. You must not go. That only made us want to go more. So the next day, we paid a local guide 5,000 baht to take us to a remote village called Ban Phai Thong. It wasn't on any map. The roads turned from asphalt to dirt, from dirt to jungle. After 6 hours, we arrived at a place that barely looked inhabited. Dark wooden houses, no electricity, and dozens of strange wooden totems covered in animal bones. The air smelled of rotting meat. An old woman, her teeth black with betel nut, welcomed us. She never spoke, just nodded and gestured for us to follow. They took us deep into jungle that night, where torches lit a clearing filled with people wearing masks made of human skulls. Ethan squeezed my arm. Dude, what the hell is this? No one said a word. They just stood in a circle, chanting in a language I had never heard before. Then they brought out the bodies. 3 of them. They looked fresh, naked, missing their hands and feet. Their stomachs were split open, their intestines coiled like snakes on the damp earth. I turned to Ethan. We need to go. But before we could move, the feast began. The villagers fell onto the corpses like animals. Some of them ripped the flesh off with their teeth, chewing with wild eyes and bloodied mouths. Others scooped up handfuls of intestines like they were noodles, shoving them into their faces. The smell? God, the smell. It was a mix of sweat, blood, rot, and something else. Something old, something inhuman. I gagged. Ethan grabbed my arm. Run. Now. We turned and sprinted into the jungle, the sounds of chewing, sucking, and snapping bones fading behind us. Branches tore at my face. My lungs burned, but we didn't stop. It took us 4 hours to find our way back to the village. Our guide was gone. A single note was left on our backpacks. You saw what was not meant to be seen. We took the first flight out of Thailand. 2 weeks later, Ethan went missing. The police found his apartment empty, his belongings untouched, his passport still on the table. The door was locked from the inside, but something was left behind on his bed. A skull mask covered in blood. I don't sleep anymore, because sometimes in the dead of night, I hear the whispers, and I know they're coming for me next. Some places should remain hidden. Some stories should remain untold. But now you know them. Would you dare to enter a graveyard at midnight? Would you look into the eyes of a witch and risk the price? The world is full of darkness, and sometimes that darkness looks back at you. If you like this video, subscribe to Creep, and remember, some nightmares are real,